So welcome everybody to this afternoon's event. It's Yoga Means Connection. And this event has been organized by Wembley Inner Space. And it's to commemorate, it's to mark the 6th annual day, the 6th United Nations International Day of Yoga. And we're going to look this afternoon at what are the different types of yoga, but also what does yoga mean? What is yoga? And how can it make a difference in our lives? And there are International Day of Yoga events happening all around the world right now. So we're really delighted that you are with us here this afternoon. And I'm particularly happy to be able to introduce to you the speakers we have with us today who are going to help us in that exploration. And as I say, looking at the different aspects of yoga, but also talking from their particular experience. And so, first of all, Clark Peters will talk about yoga with the body. Could you just say hello, Clark?
Hello.
And then secondly, Councillor Ketan Shet will talk about yoga with the community.
Hello.
And then Ashish Patel will share his experience, his insights into yoga with the self.
Hi.
And then finally, Maureen Goodman, Sister Maureen from Brahmakumaris, will talk about yoga with the higher source. Let me tell you a little bit about Inner Space Wembley for those of you who are not aware. Inner Space Wembley is an oasis of calm and nurturing and stillness on the busy high street of Wembley. It's a place to discover one's own self. It's an information center, and it's a place of learning where we can do courses, you can do events, and you can practice meditation in a way and at a time that suits you. It's managed by the Brahmakumaris UK, and Brahmakumaris is part of a network of organizations right around the world in over 120 countries who teach Raja Yoga as a practice to help us reflect, know ourselves better, and find a positive attitude to our lives. Let's think a little bit before I ask our speakers to speak about what is this thing called yoga. So as many of you will know, yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to unite, to link, to connect. And this is really the essence of what we want to talk about today. It's about finding balance, about finding harmony and alignment. So we're connecting the mind and the body, consciousness and matter, man and nature, the soul and the divine. It originated in India, but now yoga is happening everywhere in the world. In fact, and in so many different forms. And I was thinking that, I bet the original yogis would be quite surprised if they see what was going under the name of yoga these days. It used to be considered in the West, it used to be considered a little bit odd, a little bit airy-fairy, but now it's mainstream. There's even an all-party parliamentary committee on yoga in the UK Parliament. But it's practiced in businesses, it's practiced in schools, in hospitals, prison service, health service, police service. So people are seeing the benefit. And what I think unites all the different aspects of yoga, all the different forms of yoga, is this desire for calm, this desire for clarity and stillness. And Raja Yoga, what the Brahmakumaris teach and practice, Raja Yoga is a yoga of the mind. So we don't need mats or lycra or strange postures. It's not that. It's about learning how to use my mind in a way that's going to benefit me and try and prevent my mind using my mind in a way that's not going to help me. And perhaps at this time that we are going through right now, yoga might have something very special for all of us. And so that's what I'm going to be very much looking forward to hearing what our different speakers have to share about yoga. And I'd like to start by introducing our first speaker, who is Clark Peters, who I've known for quite a little while and I'm sure many of you know him too. Clark has been meditating, he's just told me, since 1986, and he describes meditation as a tool to neutralize the negative. Clark, many of you will know from his acting, singing, directing, writing career. I actually also remember him when he was a dancer. And he's going to talk about that connection between the mind and the body. And Clark works in theatre, he works in film, he works TV, and many of you will know, will maybe have seen or will know of his award-winning musical, Five Guys Named Mo. He was also in Trevor Nunn's production of Porgy and Bess in the West End. And perhaps many of you will know him for his characters in the TV series Treem and The Wire. And then also more recently, his role in the TV production of His Dark Materials. So he's played lots of different characters. He's had lots of experience of using his body and acting through his body and experiencing life through his body. So I'd like to start, Clark, if I may, by asking you, what's your experience as an actor of the connection, the relationship between the mind and the body, between what I'm thinking and what I'm doing, and between what's invisible and what's visible?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Can you hear okay? Yes, okay. The connection is an interesting one. In yoga, we are asked to make a few considerations. In Raj Yoga, we are asked to consider first of all ourselves as being a conscious entity, and that this conscious entity has organs, the mind, its personality, the bits that make up its personality, and the intellect, the way that it perceives, the way it sees the world. Well, these three things are exactly the same tools that an actor uses when wearing a costume of another character. In doing so, first of all, the actor themselves becomes the conscious part of that soul, becomes the soul of that character. In looking at that character, we're asked as actors to give it a biography, right? If there isn't one that comes attached to it. So in that biography, there are some actors who will go from childhood to the present day, and in that moment, throughout that, there are certain events that come up that feed into the way the author has written the personality of that character. Yes. So when one inhabits that biography, we may find that, okay, the person was hit by a car, and that they have a limp. In the case of I'll use Porgy as the best example, right? When I was doing Porgy, I went down to South Carolina to investigate who this man was that DuBose Hayward built into the character of Porgy. What I found was that he was, number one, a man who was crippled. We don't know how or why, but that he got around Charleston with a goat cart. We also know that that the police had given this man a small caliber pistol to protect himself. Okay, so with just these two bits of information, I figure one is that there's something that is reclusive about him because he lives with a goat, right? Number two, there's something strong about his character because the police were giving him a pistol to protect himself, right? So there's two things that begin to move in my body concerning this. One is that there is a desire not to be too close to people because people don't want to be too close to me. Possibly because I live with a goat and probably smell like a goat. Yes. So that adds a certain way that he will look at the world and the people around him, as particularly those he doesn't know. He's been given this pistol to protect himself. So in order for the police to give him this, there must be something honorable about the man in order for them to do so. So I imbue this character with a certain pride and a certain sense of self-esteem, but at the same time, a little bit wary because there's a reason why he's been given this pistol. And he's a cripple. So when I put all of this together, I figure, how is he a cripple? Maybe polio. That's the easiest one to go with. So you lose your legs. You lose the quality of balance. You find that having done this for many years, that there are things that you just naturally hold on to. It's just the way that you go. Your physicality moves because you're always someone who's grabbing around looking for something to hold on to. So this becomes a part of your physicality. Yes? You're looking over your shoulder because you don't know where the next assault is going to come from. So that becomes part of your body language, so to speak, and how you relate, or how Porgy relates to the world. So this, I find, is the way that one uses the sense of, or the application of, looking at the consciousness as being having a habit, a personality. The habits form the personality, which we wind up calling sanskara, or is in the world with his looking around, is our mind. The way that he chooses to react in the world is the intellect. So by applying all of these, and I didn't realize that this is something that I was doing, but this is exactly how an actor is asked to build their characters. He needs to have a biography, which is what we have. He puts on the actor himself puts on a costume, like a soul being born into a body. At the end of the day, at the end of the show, you take off your costume, and where do you go? Home. And you forget that. You don't carry it home with you. Some aspects of that character will come with you because you have imbued that character with a few of those personalities anyway. But you don't want to take too much of Porgy home with you. The other thing that I found very interesting with yoga and acting, as an actor on stage, you are constantly asked to find your light.
Uh-huh.
Because if you are not in your light, you will not be seen. So you as an actor have to find your light. You as the soul in this body, it would behoove you to find your light as well. So there are lots of ways that yoga for me has, and particularly Raj Yoga, has come into serving me in building a character, carrying me on through a performance, through many characters. Some of them carry on from one. I may find something in exploring myself that I see can go from Porgy to Lester Freeman in The Wire, or to Treme, the big chief in Treme. There are certain aspects that are the same in those characters that resonates with Clark, not necessarily as a part of Clark, but I can explore that part of Clark through those characters, and thereby have a better understanding of myself.
So it works both ways. Very interesting.
Yes.
I remember somebody once saying to me, who was an actor and director, and he said, people often think that actors are kind of like, they're always playing that it's like they're phony, but actually actors know exactly why they are doing what they are doing in that moment. They are very present.
Yes, yes.
And that's actually an essential part of yoga, right? Would you agree?
Yes. And also there's also this aspect that when you find a truth in yourself that resonates with the character, that truth is universal. That truth is universal. And whether the audience knows it or not, when you pluck that string, and we're all hardwired to a few things, like love, for example, the audience don't understand why they feel that.
Mm.
If you take a piano and stick it on one end of the room and a guitar or a string instrument on the other, and you hit the E on string on the guitar will start to vibrate empathetically. Human beings are the same way. So when we are sitting in yoga in the middle of the night or in the morning, and we decide to have the intention to hit the E string because we want to spread some peace, you can guarantee that there's somebody across the world who is vibrating to your thoughts, just like we experiment every day on stage with somebody. You know, the audience always gets it when we are true to ourselves. They get it as well.
Beautiful. So being in our light. But thank you so much, Clark. That's lovely.
Rachel, for inviting me. Cheers.
Okay, we'll come back to you a little bit later, but I'd now like to move on. And I'd like to introduce you all to Ketan Sheth, Councillor Ketan Sheth. Ketan is the councillor for particular wards in the borough of Brent, Tockington, Wembley Hill and Wembley Park. And these are the most diverse wards in the most diverse borough in the country. So he has a very wide experience of different communities' needs. Ketan chairs the Brent Council's Community and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. He's a lawyer by profession, and he sits on a number of public bodies, including being the chairman of the Valuation Tribunal for England. He's also a lead governor of the Central and Northwest London NHS Foundation Trust. Ketan has a particular interest and passion in community cohesiveness. So I can't think of a better person to open our eyes wider to what yoga with the community is all about. So I'm missing Ketan's picture at the moment, but perhaps it will come back on the screen right now. Is that possible to do that, or have we lost him?
I'm still here.
Oh, great. Okay, so maybe if I remove my picture, we can see you. Let's try that, because it's really important that we see you. No, we're not seeing you now. Never mind. Okay, it will sort itself out. Maybe our friends in the back can help you. Shall we move on and see if we can? Maybe we move on. And, yeah.
If Ketan, if you will look in the lower left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a microphone that says mute and something that says stop video that has a camera on it. And if you were to touch that, perhaps you've inadvertently stopped the camera from being used. There we go.
A master of solutions. Thank you, Clark.
It's gone off again.
We had you.
Ketan, whatever you just did is exactly what you need to do again.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So Ketan, while you're getting yourself set up, tell us about what yoga with the community means to you personally and why you feel it's so important. You give so much of your time, you give your life to the community. Why is it so important?
Rachel, thank you very much for that very, very kind introduction. And indeed, my thanks to Deepening and the entire Inner Space Wembley team for putting together this wonderful event this afternoon. It is a great pleasure to join you all on Zoom on this International Day of Yoga 2020 and spend a few moments with you to talk about yoga, health, and of course, the importance of community. Yoga is rapidly becoming popular as a community-based approach to improving health and well-being by overcoming isolation or loneliness. And that's a good thing, right? Especially when we consider that researchers say loneliness and social isolation are the root cause of many underlying health problems. And sadly, social isolation is on the rise. So let me explain why I think yoga is important and the benefits it can offer us all to improve our health and mental well-being in our modern society. I know that many of us feel that yoga can offer activities and experiences which are healthy for mind and body. And that yoga also gets involved with others, which is often crucial for our well-being. For some, yoga can offer opportunities for informal drop-in and social interactions, combined with more structured programs of activity or recreational therapy. World Health Organization, who initiated the International Day of Yoga, which Rachel alluded to at the outset, has recognized that the level of empowerment, choice, influence, and control we have over our lives has a significant impact on all those factors and our physical and mental well-being. It is said promoting self-management may help us improve our mental and physical health and take more control over our lives. The success of our community relies, I think, in large part on the trust we place in our communities and knowledge that our community will be there should we need the support. So, as we, as a community, take steps out of this devastating impact of COVID-19, we need to examine both the practical ways that community-led yoga can operate, given great demand for support services with ever-decreasing resources. I also think we need to make the commitment to working in partnership to increase local knowledge of yoga's pivotal role in the social prescribing matrix. We also need to understand the link between community-led yoga, social prescribing, and our resilience. Just as we all accept the need for the government to provide a right to healthcare, to a decent education, or social security, we should argue, I believe, for access to community-based recreational therapies as part of our progressive social prescription. Recreational therapy is a type of therapy that uses engaging activities such as yoga to enhance a personal physical and mental abilities, resilience, and overall well-being. This type of therapy may benefit many people of all ages with recovering, coping, coming to terms with where and how they live. I would like to say as well that yoga is for everyone. I would like to say as well that everyone can do yoga. Yoga, as we know, requires no equipment, no specific skills or physical abilities, and can be practiced by anyone in any condition, in any location. Yoga allows us into people's lives for a moment of grace while we are all on our mats. We can feel connected to other people in room, regardless of our lived experiences and external conditions that separate us from each other. Also, yoga does not have to be so serious. We can laugh and talk to each other and expect the unexpected and go with the flow. So, Rachel, let me end by saying that in the 1940s, the social reformer William Beveridge developed the welfare state, as we all know, to tackle what he called the 5 giant evils of his time: squalor, ignorance, want, idleness, disease. They certainly were evils of that time. I think today, in 2020, in the 21st century, we should say that loneliness and isolation are increasingly becoming another great evil. But on this International Day of Yoga 2020, let's remember we have this important practice which can help tackle that model evil, which can affect all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan, very much. You brought up some concepts that are really lovely. Yes, the way that the connection of yoga can help combat isolation and loneliness and create a sense of trust in the community and that sense of support. And it can help us build our own resilience and have maybe more control over our lives by being able to manage ourselves better. And I really love that phrase of when we're in yoga together, we come into a state of grace. Very beautiful. And what you've shared actually is not a contrast, but it leads very beautifully into our next sharing, which is I'm going to ask Ashish to talk about yoga with the self. So yoga with the community and yoga with the self are very much interconnected. Let me tell you a little bit about Ashish. I've known him for quite a long time, and he's a great connector. He's an IT professional. Until recently, he was sales director for an IT company. And at the same time, he was part of the core team of our Lighthouse Retreat Center in Worthing, helping with retreats and events and that we do for a wide variety of people. Ash's particular passions are twofold, I would say. One is that he absolutely loves working with youth, and he's organized and facilitated many retreats for young people, young leaders. And also he loves organizing meditation events, journaling events that encourage us to go deeper and to discover something deeper within ourselves. So Ashish, please tell us a little bit about what you understand by yoga with the self. And perhaps I could start by saying, what self are we connecting with? Or what self are we having yoga with? And how do we make and maintain that connection in what are perhaps very busy lives?
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Just wanted to check. Brilliant. So yeah, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to share actually. And actually just listening to Clark and Ketan Bhai, there's certain key words that stood out for me. So particularly for Clark, what stood out for me was finding your light. And Ketan Bhai, obviously, when he shared the trust we place in our community. And I feel this word trust and finding your inner light just weaves very nicely into this aspect of inner connection. Because I think for me, and I can only reflect on my own journey on the spiritual path, because before the spiritual path, I have to say I had very little awareness of this inner world that we use very openly when we're on a spiritual path, and particularly when it comes to kind of being really aware of my true nature and my true qualities. So from my perspective, and certainly from the teachings of the Raj Yoga that I've taken a tremendous amount of benefit from, this connection with the self is firstly connection with truth. Yeah, and a connection that allows me to see myself truthfully and honestly, but also allows me to see myself as I am. What is my real nature? And I think when I first learned about it theoretically, it made a lot of sense. But when I experienced it, that's when a different perspective came into the picture, because then you've then got this experience that allows you to see what good looks like, before which you never had. And so I feel the experience of the inner self is all of this wisdom kind of manifesting practically to realize your own truth, yeah, and to feel peaceful. And it's nothing more than feeling peaceful as a start, and then emerging that peace to look at the rest of my life. And my first experience of this, I mean, I was very lucky to have grown up in a family that were full of meditators, and that came to the spiritual journeys at different points, but actually came reasonably together. But so I couldn't see anything different, I have to say, because I was just raised in that way of life where we spent time meditating and spent time at the Brahma Kumari Center. And then it was only after, in my late teens, when I decided, actually, it wasn't a conscious decision, but it was just a very natural feeling of just going away and seeing the world for myself and making sense of this outer connection, inner connection, and seeing what works out. And I remember my first experience when I was about 20 years old, and I'd gone to the Global Retreat Center, and I specifically took a week off to spend time on my own. And I had no idea what I was going to expect, but I was so needed that space, because I was going through a tremendous amount of stress in that period of my life. And you can imagine the level of stress and the intensity of stress I would have been going through just to be able to take a week off and spend a week at the Global Retreat Center. And my first evening, I'll never forget that. We had a meditation together. It was a group meditation. And there was such a wonderful experience of peace that my eyes didn't open fully after it. Everyone had got up and left the room, but I was still sat there, just completely consumed by this feeling of peace. And that for me was truth. That for me made me realize, actually, there is such a big difference in this world I've been trapped in that's been causing me stress and suffering, and this world which is my true nature. And that was, I can say, that was the first seed to me really kind of beginning to reconcile these two worlds, if that makes sense. And seeing that world now, the world that had created the stress, but through this lens of peace. And so for me, that is connection. That is being able to use the power of the real self to begin to see my life the way it is, not the way it should be, the way others want it to be, but actually the way it is. And when we do that, I feel there is such a level of truth that begins to emerge that creates realizations. And I had many realizations in that week away that started off in that one evening with that experience of peace. And so I feel this connection with the inner self starts with me first just experiencing compassion, because compassion is this experience of peace, funnily enough. And when I experience this kindness and gentleness and this feeling of peace internally, then I can see myself truthfully. And I've always thought that, you know, if this word compassion is to see myself or to deal with suffering with care, then this word mercy is to deal with suffering with truth. And we can't have mercy on ourselves until we're compassionate. And I feel that often in my life, and even coming to a spiritual journey, I've tried to be merciful to myself by being truthful, but actually missed this step of compassion and kindness and gentleness. And I used the truth to beat myself with. And that's when I feel there's a subtle difference between self-judgment and self-honesty. Because when we're in this space of mercy, we can be deeply honest with ourselves, but actually there is this willingness to progress. But when I think I'm being honest, but it creates a feeling of heaviness inside, and it's happened for me so many times. I think I'm being honest, but actually I'm being self-judgmental. Very subtle, but I'm seeing my defects and I don't want to go there. So this word inner connection and yoga with the self and connection with the self really means the process of seeing my suffering and then starting with compassion, taking responsibility for my feelings and my inner world, and then working with truth as the next step to see what I can change in it. So I felt maybe that's probably a good essence to share with you as a start. Yeah.
Fantastically empowering, because I think we all, it's like, you know, we have suffering and what do we do with it? And as you say, quite often what we do is we just compound it by giving ourselves a hard time, and we don't take that first step of compassion. And that's really where, when I recognize the light in myself, when I recognize the goodness in myself, that's when I'll start to do that. Otherwise, I'll just listen to all the old stories. Really beautiful. Thank you so much for that. That was really lovely. And so, I think, so helpful and practical for us all. So we move on to our final speaker today, Sister Maureen, who many of you will know, but some of you may not know. So I'll say a little bit about her. Sister Maureen, Program Director for the Brahma Kumaris in the UK. She's also the Brahma Kumaris representative at the UN in Vienna. For over 30 years now, she's been working in the area of interreligious dialogue, in the UK, but also internationally. And indeed, she served on committees such as the World Congress of Faith. She's been at the core of the BK's outreach work in prisons, in healthcare, education, youth, women's issues, and many more, and latterly also in the environmental issues. Maureen travels widely, giving workshops and seminars, but at the moment she's Zooming widely. So we're very happy that she's Zooming in with us today. Very interesting, yoga with the higher source. And perhaps I would start by asking you to explain to us, what do you mean by the higher source? And why is a connection with the higher source something that might be very useful to the world right now? Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. And yes, traveling the world, who knows how much travel there's going to be in the future? Let's see. But yes, thank you for the questions. Very important questions for today. And I think that we all want to feel at some point in our lives, and perhaps at present even more so, a sense of comfort, a sense of nurturing, because all the things that we're going through, all the situations that we hear about are much less than nurturing at the current time. And I think this is where the connection with that higher source becomes really, really important. And when I think of that source, or I would even say that being, I think of something greater than myself. And we've been hearing beautiful things from the previous three speakers, and I actually felt from them an extraordinary quality.
Mm.
And that quality that's a little bit beyond human, not dehuman, no, beyond human. In other words, there's something of that higher source that is driving and empowering, I think, all of us, but you particularly can feel it in some people. And so this is a being, if you like, that doesn't, get trapped in the mundane as we do. And we oscillate, as Ash said, between the compassion, the self-judgment, and all the different things that have been expressed. But to be able to rely on a being that doesn't actually come into any kind of limitation in that way, but is really a very constant source for us, because very little is constant in this world. In fact, the only thing that is certain is uncertainty, actually. And so when we say a constant source, a source of what? A being that's constantly emanating those very highest qualities that we all identify with and know that ultimately we wish to have. And they've been mentioned: peace, love, wisdom, truth, joy. These are things that we all wish to have in our lives, but we feel that they're somehow inaccessible. Or sometimes because we see the situation around us, we almost feel that perhaps we're not worthy of them. When we look at ourselves or we see other people suffering, well, maybe I don't have a right to be so happy or full of love because so many people are suffering. But it's interesting that that connection with that source of qualities, actually, it's not a selfish thing to be doing. It's when I connect and I'm able to feel that transformational energy of that love and peace and strength and wisdom that actually isn't limited, then the more I can experience that, the more I can be unlimited, or I can really help and serve others. Because we get so influenced by all the things around us. I think every one of us. And when we wish to give, sometimes that giving is, there's something that stops us from giving as much as we would wish to. And that something is influence. We come into some sort of negativity about something, a little criticism or a little jealousy or whatever it is. And all of that actually breaks our connection with that higher source. Anything of negativity breaks the connection. And then I'm not actually able to give in the way that I would like to give, or in a way that really is needed in the world. Because a lot of people are doing many good things to help each other. And that is so, so important. And Ketan mentioned about community. And I mean, I've worked with different communities. It's been such a great privilege to work with many different communities. And community is so important, and that feeling of belonging is so important. But somewhere I need to be able to serve not only my community, but have that consciousness of serving the whole of humanity. And I think we all belong to that higher source, no matter where we come from, what our situation is, what our background is. That is the source, or in a sense, you could say the parent of all of humanity. And connecting gives us that true sense of belonging, not just to the source, but to the whole of humanity. And I find that very, very beautiful. And it is interesting that on the one hand, this big expansive idea of connecting to the whole of humanity, it sounds very grand, doesn't it? But actually, when you come to live your life in that sort of awareness, because that connection with that higher source has given you inner strength, it's also given you that ability to have greater clarity, to have greater access to your own inner wisdom, then the way you live your life in very particular situations or in the minutest detail becomes a way in which you are able to help others so that they can also make that connection and empower themselves. And whatever you do and the decisions you take and the way in which you live your life and move through life, it becomes a way in which you're able to give comfort and happiness to others. And so I really feel that this connection is something that is very, very transformative. And I think that's what's needed in the world. We don't need sticking plasters over the situations, and there are so many crises going on, and now we're being warned that as we come out of COVID-19 situation, we are going to move even more into an environmental crisis. And I mean, it's all very complex, isn't it? But there are so many things going on, but somewhere there needs to be wisdom brought to bear. And there needs to be, I feel, a real transformation in our perspective and our outlook and our attitude towards others. We've seen very beautiful examples where people have come together beyond all the divides, but we've also seen the opposite too. And I, don't want, of course, we all know what's going on, but that transformation inside, so that I'm really, it's quite a thing to see. It sounds very cliched, but it's really powerful. Seeing the good in others. And when we do see the good in others, because everybody has some good, some inherent goodness, which Ashish alluded to. And when we see that, that's what we empower in others. And when we see, the failings or the weaknesses, which we all have, that's what we empower, whether in the self or in others. And sometimes it's just so natural to look in that way or to have that perspective. But that connection with the higher source actually helps that inner transformation, where I'm beginning to see the good, work with the good, and bring that good out of others as well. So on the one hand, it's a very beautifully absorbing experience. And on the other hand, it's intensely practical because it helps us to live our lives, I feel, with truth and reality and with dignity. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. That was absolutely beautiful. Talking about being beyond human.
Yeah.
Yes, what Clark said earlier about finding our light, knowing, or Ashish about discovering our own truth. And this thing about, you know, seeing beyond perhaps what our idea, our image of ourselves to something that's much greater.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can't see it, but the higher source, that the feeling and the experience we have, and I know that's my personal experience, is you have you see possibilities that just weren't there before. And I think right now that's what humanity needs, as well as you said, and this links very much with what Ketanbai was saying about the sense of belonging, yes, to the one parent, but belonging to each other as well as one family of humanity.
Definitely.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, what you were saying is interesting, connects very nicely with what I started in the introduction to Clark. Clark had said that meditation is a tool to neutralize negativity. And similarly, Maureen had said that actually what gets in the way of connection is that negativity. So it's like, which tool do I pick up? That's the choice, really.
Yeah.
So I'd like now to come back to each one of you and just ask something a little bit further. And again, I'll start, if I may, with Clark. I'm very interested, and I think perhaps also many watching will be, to what extent has your acting experience informed your spiritual practice, your meditation practice? And how has your meditation practice really informed your acting experience? If you could go into, you mentioned it a little bit before, but if you can go into that a little bit more, yeah? You just have to unmute yourself, thank you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Even better.
Before I go on stage, I used to always say a prayer anyway, that I would be able to serve the piece to the best of my abilities, and that I would be able to work in harmony with the people who are telling the story. What that turned into over the past 30 years is just a sort of refined point of that, and that is that that I want to find the divine point inside of myself to tell that story as part of this drama that we're all living. How yoga has affected my role is that I was doing a tribute to Nat King Cole once, and there was a moment where I had about 32 bars of music where I just had to sit still. And I was always afraid to fall asleep because I'm facing the audience. And something said, why don't you just sit here and have a conversation with me? And I thought, I'm not listening to this. I'm not listening to that voice, right? I didn't trust it. I didn't trust it. But what I found was that when my guitarist was playing his solo for 32 bars, which is about a minute and a bit, if I sat really still and I concentrated on being a soul, not only did I come in on time and have an experience of being out the body, but on the nights when I did that, the audience went nuts. And it took me months to see some sort of connection, you know. And I go back to this point of the truths of what was happening. The song that he was singing was Mona Lisa, right? In Nat King Cole's Mona Lisa. And just a lovely, lovely, lovely song. But the audience was a middle-aged and older audience, so they were probably courting each other with that as the background music to their lives, so forth and so on, you know. But that led me to see that when I'm on stage, if there's a silent moment and I'm not doing anything, to go into the silence, right there, even if it's for 30 seconds, to just practice going into that and being ready to come out. You know, and this is also a practice that we've been given recently. This is also part of the drill that we've been given recently, you know, to go in and to go out, you know, to find that peace. So
perhaps I could just say, to let people know what you're referring to, is that in every day, Brahma Kumaris all around the world for 15 minutes stop. And we do we're kind of encouraged to think about a particular thought. And the idea is that if everybody has that thought, the connection of that all around the world. Excuse me for interrupting, but carry on.
No, that's right. So meditating has helped me in performance. In performance, having that experience, right, has allowed me to realize that what is happening is not just my imagination, but is a reality. There was a moment on, I was working over at the National, and again, it was one of those moments where I had to be really, really still and listen to this long, long speech of somebody else. And I'm thinking, I wish they would get to the end of it, you know? And, you know, so I wasn't really engaged, you know, and that was my fault, you know? And just when I was supposed to come out of it, there was a little vision off to the right-hand side of my eyes, and there was someone who I thought was there that could not have been there, but were there going, come on, come on, come on. You know, now, however, yeah, I'm trying not to appear like a madman in explaining this, but these moments of having little moments of enlightenment have been my landmarks along the way. And I have to remember them from time to time to realize that I'm on this journey of self-discovery. I'm also on this journey to help transform some of the stuff that's out here, you know, and being on stage, I'm transforming every day with hundreds of strangers. I do not know these people. I don't know, but somehow our actions, all of our actions on stage does something to them. At the end of the show, when they come back and either say, I hated that or I love that, that transforms me. So it's a two-way movement. You know? So I think that answers the question, Rachel. You know, that how
Beautiful. And I know I was quite curious to find out, you know, being an actor, what do you think is the one thing how has that helped you, or how has your acting experience helped you in terms of understanding yourself? You talked about being the soul, being the spirit. How has being an actor perhaps helped confirm that idea with you?
Well, yesterday I was driving through Chiswick, and a car pulled up in front of me and stopped, and I felt myself really getting wound up, you know, and we began this angry dialogue, you know, and my wife was saying, no, just drive. And I was thinking, I was listening to her saying, yes, I should drive, but I really want to get him for this, you know. And as I approached the junction, I thought, you know what? Let him go. Let him go. And as I gave him a little honk just to have the last word. But as I turned the corner, something was said, that was the stupidest thing that you could have done. But I was aware of what was happening. I was aware that in this environment, there are forces that are pulling us into engaging in something negative. And if we're not conscious, you know, we will be engaged in that. We will be engaged in that. I'll have to talk to you back later, Lenny. Come back to you. Oh, have I lost you?
No, we're here. We
Oh,
got
And
you.
we can hear you.
Oh, well, I've lost you on my screen. Anyway,
You're here. You're with us, and we see you.
so
So influence, the influence of negativity.
the influence of the negativity got to me. But then I realized that, you know what, I needed to have that because it reminded me of who I am and what my role is and what I should be doing.
Mm.
And so from then on, I decided, I'm going to be on Shanti on the way home, and I found myself pulling my attention away from what was happening on the outside. I felt myself smiling on the inside because that was just a passing drama between that soul and me. And hopefully he got something from it because I certainly did. I think I got the better end of the deal in that respect.
Well, there's nothing like nearly falling asleep at the wheel to really wake you up, right?
I wasn't falling asleep now.
No, but I'm just, my personal experience is like, whoa, be alert, wake up, it's that kind of feeling, that making a mistake, and we all learn from. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'd like now to move back and interesting the conversations about what Ketembai was saying about connecting. He's so connected with the community. He's so involved there. He gives so much of his time there. And how do you manage that?
Rachel, you're embarrassing me now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I'm just saying that you're embarrassing me with all those fancy words.
Oh, I'll stop that right away then. But how do you balance that passion for the community, your deep, sincere love for the community, and your own personal needs? Because we all want to be fully engaged in the community, we want to serve and whatever, but there is a balance, isn't there? And I think, you are a judge in court. You talking about long speeches, you probably listen to quite a lot of long speeches, and sometimes they're not just long, they're pretty angry and whatever, right? So people trying to get their own way or have their opinion approved of. So you probably have a lot of experience of managing, you talk about self-managing, managing yourself in these not very positive situations and finding a positive solution nonetheless. I'd love you to share a little bit about that. How do you look after yourself in those situations and keep that balance of self and community need? Thank you.
So Rachel, thank you very much. Very interesting question. Just as Clark was explaining, I come across in my daily jobs whole lot of different people, new people every single day. Many of those individuals, I'm not likely to be meeting them again. So different set of dynamics at every single interaction. And there is different dynamics at play when I'm in the court judging, and there are different sets of dynamics at play when I'm chairing a political meeting. And to get the balance right is so important. But I think you can only get that balance right if you are within yourself balanced. And that is hugely important to me. We've heard other speakers talk about how they bring the positivity and freshness. We heard Clark saying that he takes a pause and he says a little prayer. Well, I do something similar. So particularly around the political meetings where you have very notable characters, individuals who have very strong opinions about subject under focus, a particular item under scrutiny. And they obviously want to speak with passion, with some energy. And you have a very limited time within which to get some sort of resolution or some sort of outcome from that 2-hour meeting, say. And if you are not balanced within yourself, then it is very difficult to balance that debate, that discussion under the focus. So I think for me, it is to ensure first that I am within myself balanced, that I have within myself that freshness, that positivity going into that meeting, to ensure that all of those ingredients are present at the table. For me to have that balanced meeting, to ensure that there is some sense, some purpose to that 2-hour meeting, and to ensure that that 2-hour meeting is not just going to be a mere talking shop, to ensure that there is a engagement, there is a scrutiny, and there is a outcome, which is an outcome which is just and equitable for the residents as far as the political meeting goes. As far as the meetings in the court goes, obviously you have a different set of players at play. Obviously, each player wants to prove the other player wrong, and within your self as a referee, you have to ensure that you yourself are balanced, but you're hearing those arguments which are being advanced, that there is balance there, and you're able to make a balanced judgment from hearing that balanced argument that is being advanced to you. So I guess it is all about understanding and balancing yourself to be able to have those balanced meetings for balanced outcomes, which are just and equitable and well connected.
Mm-hmm. Now, I hope I'm not letting a secret out of the out of the bag, or a cat out of the bag, whichever. But when we were speaking earlier this week, I said, "So what do you do in these really long meetings?" And I really loved it. He said, "Well, nobody knows that actually under the table sometimes."
Oh my goodness.
I'm turning my feet around to keep myself fresh. And I thought that was just so lovely. It's like, nobody knows what we're doing to kind of like just keep ourselves in yoga positions.
It's going live. Going live.
And I remember, I think it was Queen Beatrix of Holland, and she was talking about how she's in a lot of long meetings, and sometimes people are more interesting than others or more able to speak well than others. But she always, and this goes back to what Maureen was saying, she made a point of always looking for that one speciality of whatever they're saying, however they're saying it, what is it that I recognize in them that's valuable? And I thought that was really lovely. So it connects, and again, what you were doing about holding on to that purpose, keeping an eye on what the purpose is of the meeting, no matter what the behavior is going on, or what kind of play acting or posturing is going on. How do we find a solution? So that's really beautiful. And I think that helps us in terms of, what you're talking about, just always being aware, yes, at the beginning before a meeting, particularly to give that, whether it's a prayer or it's something that you say that centers yourself, but also during. And we have a practice called traffic control. So every hour in our centers all around the world, music comes in, and it's like, how do I just allow myself to step back from this role that I've got very involved in, whatever role that is, and just step back into that inner truth, that inner light, and connect with that gift. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's beautiful. So I'd now like to ask another question to Ashish, and Maureen's referred to it a little bit, but I'd like to come up with it again, which is, could it be said that, focusing on the self a lot is a little bit self-engrossed, selfish, self-indulgent, given what's going on in the world? How do we keep, again, it's about balance, but, given what the world's going through, is it appropriate that I spend so much time looking at myself, listening to myself, writing to myself?
I think absolutely. Now more than ever, I think we have to give to ourselves so much. And the reason for that is there's so much upheaval externally that's taking place, and there's so much instability externally that actually it begins to create upheaval internally. And until the fires on the inside have kind of been fanned and cooled, we can't, I don't feel we can give, you know, from a space of truth, from a space of, you know, kindness and care, you know. So we have to be the first recipients of compassion before we can extend that to somebody else. And I really appreciate this word balance, because, you know, we're so conditioned to see the negative and the defect within ourselves that actually we lose that balance within ourselves. So when we can't be objective with ourselves, so we only ever see the defects, and that creates a feeling of we can lose a lot of self-confidence and self-faith and feeling hopeless internally when we're seeing ourselves in this way. However, when we look at ourselves in a more balanced way, but see the value in ourselves as well as see the defects, that balance allows us to be objective about where I can progress and where I need to improve. And with that foresight, or with that vision, I can actually really affect my attitude in different situations. And so I feel without doing the inner work, I am reacting to situations through my attitude. But when I'm doing the inner work, I am responding to situations by being so self-aware and being aware of the repercussions of my actions, the repercussions of how people will receive them, how they will feel as well. And I think for me, I have to say that it took me many years actually to learn this one aspect of what it means to take sorrow. And this is such a deep aspect, because without being self-aware, I only ever used to think that giving sorrow was a bad thing. And all of us in the world recognize that giving sorrow is bad, you know, as human beings. But taking sorrow is just as bad, if not worse, because it's damaging our inner worlds, which then means I can't give with love. I give whatever I'm carrying internally. And when I learned the importance and significance of what it means to take sorrow, my attitude changed completely. So I feel the more we give to ourselves and the more we understand ourselves and the more we can keep ourselves in the space of feeling effectively our true nature, then actually life becomes easy for us. We find ourselves and we can present ourselves to the world authentically. And so the benefit is multifold in terms of starting with me rather than starting with the world. And also the last piece connected to this is energy. I think when different situations and upheaval in the world are draining us energetically, when we're tired, we become vulnerable. When we're vulnerable, we have nothing to share energetically. We can't give. And so I feel when we're not taking care of ourselves in that way and constantly feeding this external world and being drained, then actually I'm not able to give and make a difference. Whereas when I'm looking after myself and being kind about myself, and then I'm sharing that, actually people feel that. You know, people can just simply catch that. You don't necessarily have to use words. You know, some of the situations that I think a lot of us can really relate to are in relationships. When people share things that actually are unspoken. I remember my granddad, he used to communicate just with his eyes, you know, and I could just feel his love transferred because I could see his inner effort being shared in that vibrational form, and it would even calm me into not even coming into words. I wouldn't even want to have a conversation with him because I just felt so peaceful around him. So I think we can share at a different level as well. Yeah.
I might just ask you to, because I think some listening might think, is it possible not to take sorrow? I mean, if I feel sorrow, how do I not take sorrow?
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, taking sorrow, you know, I really appreciated what Daddy Janki once shared about that. And she basically said it's not taking sorrow is to take sorrow means to have your feelings broken. And I think when we realize our true nature and recognize that I am a being of peace, anything that breaks peace is breaking my true nature, is breaking my truth. And so if there are emotions and feelings that are breaking that true nature, then actually I've experienced sorrow. And that's as simple as it is. And yes, in different situations, we may experience sorrow because our egos are facing these situations, and when our ego is hurt, there is a tremendous amount of sorrow. But when I begin to nurture and experience the peace of the true nature, that actually begins to strengthen inside of me. And it then means, once I've tasted that peace, actually the instant attitude that most people will have is, I want to protect my peace. You know, I don't want anybody to breach that peace. And so I feel the value in kind of in growing that experience of inner peace and tasting my inner nature just naturally shapes our attitude towards not wanting to take sorrow and actually sharing that vibration of peace and the good wishes that emerge naturally from it. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Indeed. Thank you. And adds to it more. Okay, I'd like to come back to Maureen now, Sister Maureen, and I'm just remembering when I started, before I was meditating, I didn't think I was a spiritual person at all. I liked spiritual people. I thought they were awfully nice, but I didn't think I was one. And I think perhaps maybe there are some of us listening who might think, well, you know, Sister Maureen's been doing this for so many decades and whatever, and how can I connect? How could I connect with the higher source? Is it for everyone, or does someone have to be a special person, or do you have to have a special experience or whatever? So perhaps you could share a little bit more about that. You know, maybe we have little words inside us saying, well, it's very nice, but not for me. And maybe you could help dispel some of those for anyone who's listening and thinking sounds lovely, but I'm not sure that it would be something that would happen to me.
Thank you. It's a good question. Well, actually, if you feel that God is for everyone, then obviously everybody can have that connection, definitely. It is for everyone. And the divine God, whatever, higher consciousness, just doesn't leave anybody out, doesn't leave anybody behind. But there is something that needs to wake up in the self to connect. Yes, sometimes, even though we're in a very different awareness and we're not at all in a divine kind of awareness, or we have no, you know, even people may not believe in God or whatever, but something happens to them and it's like some sort of gift. Maybe they have some extraordinary experience and then they think, oh my goodness, actually there is something here. Actually, I remember somebody who was studying Raj Yoga meditation, well, still is, and she had been an atheist, and then through meditation really developed that relationship with God in a beautiful way. And she said once, she said, it was quite embarrassing. I had to go back to all my friends and tell them, well, actually, God does exist after all. But you know, I think we've been going through these different, you know, hearing from different people, and the whole thing about connecting with the self. Okay, if connecting with God seems like a very big step, but at least I can think about, well, perhaps there is something in me that's different to what I see in my day-to-day routine. And, you know, when you speak to people about inner peace or inner goodness or love, you know, they like to hear it. Why do we like to hear it? Because it is actually something that is natural to us. And we would want to learn about how to be more peaceful, how to be more loving. I think if we were to advertise a course on, you know, how to be more angry, I don't think many people would come. So these things are natural to us. And so perhaps that's the first step of realizing that there is some other way of being. And that first connection with the being, as Ashish was mentioning, the soul, okay, then I begin to think about myself in a different way. Maybe I'm not quite as bad as I thought I was. Maybe there is something really good in there. And there's something which I can give. I have, you know, it's like my heart expands to some extent, and I feel, well, maybe I could do something, whether it's an act of kindness, an act of love, whatever it is. And that seems to be the start, that waking up to goodness. And then when I'm having those kind of thoughts about myself, the step to connect with that higher being is really not very far away at all. It really is a thought away. And connecting is to do with our thinking, because whatever we think about, we're connected with. Well, yes, if I think about that being, that source, that light, then I'm going to get connected. And it can happen very quickly. I just have to really want it to happen. And once you begin to get that flow of energy, and you do feel that there's an energy that's filling you, and you know that it's making you strong, and it's making you, and it's awakening your conscience, and it's helping you to become more true to yourself and to see life in a way that you begin to see the possibilities rather than always seeing it's like this old adage of the glass half full or half empty. But you begin to see the possibilities in the self and in life and in opportunities and in the people that you're with and their possibilities. And it's all because this energy is coming through you and into the environment where you are interacting, whether it's at home, at work, or wherever. And then you think of that collectively. And really, this sort of energy is the energy that the world needs right now, because there is just so much fear prevailing. And if I begin to bring the energy of love into the environment, then of course it affects everything I do and affects the people around me. But the more people do that together, then collectively it can really have an impact in the world. And I often see how when trends start, fashion or trends can catch on very quickly. Well, why not this? Why not this trend of love and kindness and compassion is being spoken of? But I need strength to be able to maintain that in the face of all the challenges and the influences that come to me. And so that's where that connection is so important, because that gives me the strength. And I give that kind of energy out, then the negative energy can't have the same impact on me. In fact, it bounces off because what I'm giving out is so much stronger. So that connection is for everyone whenever we wish to go there. And I think it's absolutely essential at this time.
Thank you, Maureen. I really love the words you used, waking up to goodness. Very beautiful. Could we ask you now to give us a taster of Raj Yoga meditation and lead us into a guided meditation to perhaps experiment with some of the concepts, some of the experiences that have been shared today? Thank you.
Sure. So let us now take this time, this precious time, to be present here with ourselves, with the divine, and with our world. To do this, I first have to gently, without judgment, move my mind away from all the different influences around me. The sights, the sounds, perhaps past memories, perhaps fears of the future. Let me just leave them to one side, just for a short while, so I can step inside into the inner world of myself. I go beneath the surface into the heart of my being. And this is where I find the qualities that make up my true self, my true inherent goodness. I find peace. I find love. I find truth. My mind is calm. My feelings are good feelings. Good feelings towards the self and others. And in this state of peace, with a single thought, I reach out to that higher being. I'm light, energy, and the light connects with the light. I am connected with the source of all that is good and true, where there's safety, where there's comfort. I'm in that unlimited ocean of peace. In the beautiful nurturing energy of love that is so giving, so understanding, so compassionate. That comes from a being who needs nothing from me, but who is totally, utterly benevolent. I fill myself with that energy. Energy of peace, the energy of love, and naturally, automatically, it flows through me and out into the atmosphere around me. Peace reaches out. Love reaches out. Truth reaches out. the more I connect, the more is the flow of energy into my life and into the world. Thank you. Om Shanti, I am peace.
Om Shanti.
Thank you so much, Sister Maureen, for taking us with you on that beautiful journey
Thank you.
and demonstrating how really it is for each one of us individually, but also collectively. And this is, I think, what really is behind the whole International Day of Yoga, is that yoga is for each and every one of us. And I'd like to thank each and every one of our special speakers for really giving their own personal experience and take and enthusiasm for yoga, and also helping us to understand it more in depth, and how it's much more than just a few exercises on a mat. It really is. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. It's a way of getting to know ourselves, of connecting with each other, a way of creating that sense of belonging, which has been said the world very, very much needs at this time. So thank you to Peter, to Councillor Getten, to Ashish, and to Maureen. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to those who are not visible on the screen, working behind the screen to make this possible. But the biggest thank you is to all of you who joined us from wherever you are. Now, we didn't see your faces, but we feel you. We feel you very much. And it's really lovely that you're here with us this afternoon. Now, there are a few bits of news about Inner Space that I'd like to share with you. In fact, I think they might well be coming up on the screen right now. That's it. So the good news is that Inner Space Wembley is going to be reopening on 24th of June. And it's going to be, the meditation room and the bookshop will be open to the public from Monday to Saturday, after that, from Monday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And you're very, very welcome. Of course, all the social distancing rules will be observed, and great care and thought has gone into making sure that it's a safe place for everyone. So very welcome there. Then a couple of events flagging up. One is on soul coaching by Raja Shekhar, who's based in Dubai. And another, and many of you may know Sister Manda, who runs the retreat center in Oxford. Here's a good title: More Patience, Less Confusion. That's on Tuesday, the 7th of July. Okay. And then if you're interested in some of the ideas that have come up about Raja Yoga, there are 2 courses coming up. We call them fast track because it's just over a week, once every day between 5:30 and 6:45. If you speak English, then the course starts on the 6th and ends on the 12th. And if you'd like it in Hindi, the course starts on the 20th and ends on the 26th of July. We do ask you to book. And by the way, I would say, if there's one thing, one gift you can give yourself, if you haven't had it already, or even if you have and you'd like to give it to yourself again, this course is just wonderful. I really enjoyed it myself, and I always enjoy revisiting it. So for all of these things, if you'd like more information, please go to the Wembley Inner Space website, where as well as information, there's lots of resources and whatever. But also go to the Facebook page, so Inner Space Wembley on the Facebook or Inner Space Wembley on YouTube. And by the way, this event, if you'd like to revisit it, will also be on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you all very much. Please do join us again. Yoga means connection, so let's stay connected. Thank you all very much. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Bye.